The information contained in the SSI Spotlight series is designed for and intended for use by the NCAA membership. The webinar content represents the views and opinions of the participants and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the NCAA. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The NCAA does not make any representations or warranties with respect to the accuracy of the content, nor is the content intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The webinar is intended for personal viewing only and may not be recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SSI Spotlight. I'm Dr. Dina Casiro, NCA Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President of the Sports Science Institute, and I am grateful to have you with us for a timely and important discussion on a topic that continues to gain traction across collegiate athletics: the role of sleep in student-athlete well-being. Recent findings from the 2023 NCAA Student-Athlete Health and Wellness Study showed that over half of student-athletes self-reported that they wake up feeling rested on fewer than 3 days per week on average. These patterns are directly linked to increased fatigue and diminished physical and mental performance. And moreover, a significant portion of student-athletes, 40% of men's sport and 46% of women's sport athletes, expressed a desire for more dialogue and education around sleep from their care teams. This signals a clear opportunity for institutional leadership and sports medicine professionals to support student-athlete sleep hygiene. So in today's session, we will explore why sleep is a cornerstone of recovery and peak performance, what the latest research tells us about student-athletes' sleep patterns, and practical evidence-based strategies to help athletes achieve restorative sleep, and also how institutions can build a culture that prioritizes sleep through education and policy. Now let's dive into the science and explore possible solutions that can help athletes not just compete, but thrive. Before I welcome today's guest, I would like to turn to my colleague, Kelsey Gerganis-Wright, Associate Director of Research on Student-Athlete Wellbeing and Experiences, who will present some data on student-athlete sleep behaviors from the 2023 Student-Athlete Health and Wellness Study. Kelsey, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Casiro. Today, I'm going to touch on some sleep-related data from a few of our large student-athlete surveys conducted in partnership with faculty athletics representatives on NCAA campuses. Big shout out to the FARs out there and the membership for helping us collect this valuable information on student-athlete well-being. More than 20,000 student-athletes participated in each study referenced today. So we can't overstate how essential sleep is to mental health, physical performance, injury prevention, and overall well-being. In the 2023 Student-Athlete Health and Wellness Study, we found that 17% of student-athletes competing in men's sports and 28% in women's sports experienced sleep difficulties like trouble falling asleep or waking too early, constantly, or most every day in the month before taking the survey. In the same study, we found that nearly 1/2 of student-athletes reported 0 to 3 days in the week before taking the survey, where they got enough sleep that they felt rested when they woke up. 1/3 reported restful sleep on 4 to 5 days, and another 20% reported getting restful sleep almost every day. Men's sports student-athletes reported more days of restful sleep than women's sports student-athletes and showed a notable increase in the percent who reported restful sleep almost every day, up from 19% in 2019 to 25% in 2023. Here you see physical and mental functioning as it relates to good sleep. Student-athletes who reported 0 to 3 days of restful sleep in the week prior to taking the survey were much more likely to report feeling tired from the physical and mental demands of their sport, and less likely to feel like they were performing up to their ability. Among the student-athletes who reported getting a full week of restful sleep in the past week, 57% believe they were performing up to their ability, compared to 40% in the 4 to 5 days group and 40% in the 0 to 3 days group. In terms of poor sleep hygiene, student-athletes competing in women's sports are more likely to report experiencing these behaviors than student-athletes competing in men's sports. In 4 or more days in the week before survey, so over half the week, 61% on the women's side reported feeling tired or dragged out during the day, compared to 41% for men. 1/3 of women had to go to bed due to exhaustion, compared to about 1/4 of men, and 1/4 of women reported having a hard time falling asleep, compared to 19% of men. Of course, we can't have this conversation about sleep without discussing the time demands of being a student athlete. Student athletes juggle a wide range of daily responsibilities: practices, games, strength training, study hall, classes, extracurriculars, and social engagements that require a great deal of time and prioritization. Sleep is often the first thing sacrificed to accommodate their demanding schedules. In 2019, we found that the median weekly time spent on athletic and academic activities was close to 2 full-time jobs, about 70 hours per week across divisions, with an additional 15 hours used for socializing or relaxing. All while student athletes were reporting on average a little more than 6 hours of sleep on a typical in-season weeknight. In the same study, the activity that student athletes said that they wanted more time for: sleep. I do want to also note here that we just wrapped up the administration of the 2025 goals study, and we will have some updated time demands data this winter, understanding that a lot may have changed for some student athletes since 2019. Coaches and administrators play a critical role in supporting all aspects of student athlete well-being, including emphasizing and prioritizing good, restful sleep for their recovery and optimal functioning. Scheduling decisions should reflect an understanding of the importance of sleep. It should not be treated as expendable or as a badge of toughness to be able to function on minimal sleep. Sleep truly is foundational to performance, health, and academic success. And student athletes want to hear more from their coaches and administrators about sleep. Across all of our studies, which include this type of question, student athletes have consistently identified sleep as a top topic, along with nutrition and mental wellness, that they'd like coaches and administrators to spend more time discussing with them. If you'd like more information on our studies, you can go to ncaa.org/research, noted on this slide. Thank you for your time and attention today, and now I will turn it back over to Dr. Casiro.
Thank you, Kelsey. It's now time to welcome today's guest, Dr. Michael Grandner. Thank you so much for being with us today. Could you please start by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your experience with sleep and its role in collegiate athletics?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for this opportunity to talk about this thing I care a lot about. So my background is I'm a clinical psychologist by training, but my background is really in sleep and circadian science, and I've worked in this field for over 20 years now. Um, my research and my clinical work is all about how do we take what we know about sleep and circadian science and translate it into ways that can help people improve their health and their well-being and their functioning. And that's taken me into athletics as a part of what I do. In addition to running research projects and studying scientifically how sleep is related to athletic performance and how sleep is related to health in athletes, I've also worked a bit with the NCAA. I helped out. I was part of developing some of the mental health best practices around sleep. There was a sleep and wellness task force a number of years ago that I was a part of, and a position statement. The Mind, Body, and Sport, a book. I wrote the sleep chapter on that. And I've been involved in a number of other athletics organizations over the years, helping with position statements, education, and other things around sleep. So I feel like over the years, I've gotten to know not just the sleep science part, but a little bit about how it can relate to athlete well-being and functioning and performance.
Well, this is perfect. Your experience is exactly what we need for today's
Awesome.
spotlight. Excited to see what we can learn from you today. So sleep is something that we all experience, yet it remains one of the most fascinating and essential functions of the human body.
Yeah.
Before we dive into the complexities of sleep health and its broader implications, let's start off by just talking about the basics. What
Yeah.
exactly is sleep? Why do we need it? And how much of it is considered enough?
Yeah, that's a great question, or a few questions. I want to start with this idea of why do we need sleep? And I feel like, the correct answer to that question is, well, we still don't know. There's so many things. We're learning about it all the time. But the truth is, although we're still learning all the different things that sleep can do for us, we do know why we sleep. We sleep because we're required to. It is a biological requirement. We sleep for the same reason we breathe. No one asks, well, why do we need breathing for? Well, it's to take in oxygen and all the cells in our body use it. Sleep is the same way. Sleep is something that is a fundamental part of how our body works in terms of its ability to function properly. And, we don't sleep because we enjoy it. We sleep because we have to, because it is tied to so many different functions in our body. So it relates to learning and memory. This is how we take our experiences from the day and turn it into memory for the future. Our immune system sleeps. That's when most of our recovery and healing and repair happens. Growth hormone, especially for athletes and younger athletes, is really important. Pretty much only secreted during a very specific stage of sleep. Sleep is really important for emotions, memory, brain functions, reaction time, thinking ability, cardiovascular health, metabolic health. All these systems in our body are intricately connected to each other, and sleep plays a role in them. So skimping out on sleep, it's what you're really doing is you're preventing your body from taking care of itself and engaging in the maintenance it needs to function optimally. So how much sleep do you really need? Going to your question. I'll answer that by first saying that sleep is actually multidimensional. What that means is it's not just about amount. Think of it like nutrition, where you have to consume enough calories to function, but if all those calories are empty calories, it's still not good. You still need nutrition. And sleep is similar, where you have sleep duration, where the typical adult probably needs at least 7 hours for optimal sleep. Athletes might need a little bit more if they're engaging their recovery processes and training a little more heavily. Younger people, especially adolescents and young adults, might need closer to 8, 9, maybe even up to 10 hours if on the younger side for optimal functioning. But that's just amount. We're talking about sleep quality too. So if your sleep is shallow or fragmented, even if you're getting, quote, enough sleep, it might not be of enough quality to get all of those recovery processes to happen. It has to be timed correctly, where if your biological clock puts the night here and you're trying to sleep over here like a shift worker, your body's not going to be as efficient in that repair and recovery processes. If your sleep is highly irregular and becomes a moving target, again, just like with nutrition and meals being a moving target, it makes it harder for your body to predict what's going to come, anticipate it, and recover optimally. So to recap, sleep is important, touches lots of different functions in the body for lots of important reasons. It's probably good to target at least 7 hours, maybe closer to 8 for athletes, especially on the younger side. But also, it's important to think about the sleep quality as well.
That's great. You said a lot of great things there that I wish I had thought of when I was counseling student athletes. I love the comparison to nutrition.
Yeah.
It's not just about eating, it's what you eat and how
Right.
much you eat and the quality of the food that you
And
eat.
when and how regular are your meals and are they balanced? All these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love it. So many of us in the sports medicine field know that sleep is foundational to health, but it's often overlooked in performance conversations. Now,
Yeah.
personally, I like to refer to sleep as a legal performance enhancing drug.
Yes.
I used to tell my athletes all the time, it's legal, it's free.
Yep.
You need to sleep, sleep, sleep. So let's unpack that idea a little bit by exploring how sleep intersects with different areas of student athlete performance. And we can start by talking about athletic performance. So research consistently shows that inadequate sleep can impair reaction time, endurance, and strength. These are all things that athletes don't want to have reduced, right? So can you walk us through how does sleep directly influence things like athletic output or physical readiness?
Yeah, great question. I mean, if I told you I've got like a routine for you, an exercise routine, a workout routine for you, and that's been studied for decades and the data on it are really strong, and that by engaging in this, you have a really good chance of improving your on the field, on the court athletic performance by whatever metric you want at between 9 and 35%, depending on the outcome you're looking at. Would you do it? And if I told you that the main side effects for doing this is that it's also likely that your grades are going to go up, your relationships are going to improve, your health will be better able to manage, you'll be more mentally focused, you'll be more emotionally stable, less stressed out, and you'll feel like your life was a little more in balance. And those are the main side effects of doing this workout routine. And you don't actually have to do it every day, but the more days you do it, the more you're going to get the benefits from it. Would you do it? What would you do to make sure that you made time for this workout routine every day? And then I said, I mean, if it costs money, you'd probably be more likely to do it. But it's free and you can do it in your bedroom whenever you want. So, I mean, that's the thing. People see sleep as a cost of time. And there's nothing that student athletes lack more than time. And I remember I'll never forget sitting in that first meeting for the mental health best practices at NCAA, and we had all these different stakeholder groups, and one of the stakeholders was students, and the students were present in the meeting. And I remember one of the students saying, "Look, if you're asking me to give up the 1 hour of my evening after I turn my homework in before I go to bed, that is my 1 hour of the day that's for me. I don't get any other time." And I'm like, that's a tough ask. What if I don't ask you for time? What if I can give you more time? What if the reason that's the only time in the day that you have and you're clinging to it like that is because maybe we can find other, like if you were sleeping better, maybe you would have other time during the day. Maybe you would take less time to do your homework because you can get it done faster and more efficiently. Maybe you would feel more in balance. And when we did this we tried this out. Actually, we had a grant from SSI to pilot a program based on what we learned from those conversations. It worked beautifully, where the students, like, we didn't tell them to give up any time, but they ended up finding ways to help it improve their lives. So, okay, so getting back to the question of what do we know about those impacts on performance? In terms of the domains, if you're not able to get enough sleep, first, in terms of the outcomes that people care about, strength and speed. There's studies looking at bench press, leg press, sprint speed, pretty much any raw output outcome, you do have a decrement. But more importantly are things where the mind and body are at an interface. Things like, so there's a great example of this was a study in tennis players where serving accuracy dropped they took them from about 8 hours down to 5. Serving accuracy dropped by about 35%. And then they split people up again of the sleep deprived group. They gave half of them a whole bunch of caffeine to see if you could caffeinate this away. And the caffeine helped. It recovered about 30% of the loss of functioning, 20 to 30% of the loss of functioning, more or less, if I remember correctly, was recovered by caffeine. And that's sort of what you see in the literature over and over again, that especially where you have to coordinate the mind and the body in terms of focus and attention and decision making and balance these things with your physical performance, you take a pretty big hit. And it's not rescued with stimulants. Like, you can't stimulant this away. You're at that point, your decision making is still impaired. That frontal lobe function doesn't get fixed with your reaction time will improve. Your fatigue will improve. Your ability to focus will improve with caffeine. But at that point, you're just making bad decisions faster. And that, I think, is the underlying issue here, that there's no replacement for sleep except for sleep. And part of what's happening with sleep is those experiences are getting organized and integrated for your ability to function. Otherwise, you've got a lot of this junk floating around and it's clouding your ability to function optimally, whether it's physically, whether it's mentally, or even at that intersection.
Yeah, the other study I like to quote when I'm talking to athletes is, I think it was out of UCLA, the one with basketball players.
Oh yeah, the Stanford basketball players. Yeah.
Oh, Stanford. Yeah. That was a phenomenal study. And when you show that to a basketball athlete and say, hey, there's an opportunity here for you to improve your free throw and 3-point percentage by 30%. Who
Yeah,
wouldn't say, sign me up?
exactly. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, Sherry Ma
absolutely.
led that work, and it was one of the brilliant things about that study was those basketball players weren't even sleep deprived.
Yeah, right.
It
That's
was
right. They
it
just
wasn't
added more sleep to
right
their
because
already decent sleep
this
schedules,
is what
right?
I meant about younger athletes
Yeah,
probably needing more than, if you're a 40-year-old athlete, maybe your target should be 7 to 8. But
yeah,
if you're 20, maybe your target should be 9 or
yeah,
and like with them they actually went even more and they did better.
yeah.
So as you're younger, more sleep, you know, there is such a thing as too much, but that's a hard number to find on the younger side when you're on the younger side, especially if you're an athlete. That was a beautiful thing. They weren't even like, forget if sleep deprivation, you're not even just rescuing impairment. You were taking people who were already good and you were making them great.
Yeah. So, we've touched a little bit on athletic performance, and obviously
Yeah.
that's incredibly important to athletes, but recovery is also really
Yeah.
important. Athletes know it's important, and we know it's important. So we know that sleep is probably one of the most critical recovery tools
Yeah.
available to athletes. So talk a little bit about how sleep can support things like physical recovery, muscle repair,
Yeah.
how it might interplay with injury prevention and even overall resilience.
Yeah, from an injury prevention standpoint, it's good to not need to recover if you don't get injured in the first place. And there's data from all over the world in terms of all kinds of occupational groups of factory workers, truck drivers, you know, uh, police, firefighters, like any of these groups that have to perform. When you sleep deprive them, they have more injuries, they have more accidents, they crash more, they make worse decisions, they make split decisions in the wrong direction. People end up taking unnecessary risks more when they're sleep deprived, and you're more likely to get injured. There's actually, so we did a study a bunch of years ago in it was a bunch of Division 1 athletes, and um, what we did was we actually just screened their sleep over the summer before they started. And then we just followed them over the year through every interaction they had with health and wellness in the athletics department to see who got concussions. And what we found was, while it was true that being male, having a prior concussion history, and being in a high risk sport all elevated likelihood of getting a concussion over the year, um, how much insomnia you had when you showed up and especially how much daytime sleepiness you were experiencing in the summer. Not even necessarily how much sleep you were getting, but that daytime sleepiness you were experiencing actually was a better predictor of getting a concussion than any of those other normal concussion risk factors. So it just goes to show that players who aren't sleeping well are just more likely to have these problems, whether they know it or not. But in terms of recovery, sleep plays a lot of roles in rebuilding and repairing, whether it's in the brain and also in the body in terms of the immune system. I mean, this is also why a lot of reorganization and remodeling, if you look at the genes that get upregulated during the night, while you're asleep, a lot of those genes have to do with macromolecule biosynthesis and transport. It's creating the raw materials for your body to do its job and putting them in the right place. In terms of cellular repair, evolution figured out a long time ago that it's much easier to change your car's oil and to do repairs while you're not still driving it. I mean, it's possible to recover and do things while you're awake. It's just much less efficient. And so we have a lot of systems in our body that capitalize on that, where during sleep, those recovery systems get massively upregulated. And that can speed up recovery, especially, I mean, it interacts with things like, if you have a protein-rich diet, well, guess what? You're going to be using those raw materials to rebuild, but it's not going to happen during the day. Those are going to float around till nighttime when your body uses them a little bit more. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's happening in the night. Growth hormone, I mentioned earlier. Growth hormone is secreted pretty much only in non-REM stage 3 in the first few hours of the night. That's where it's going to be concentrated. Um, and then in terms of learning and the procedural learning that a lot of athletes have to go through and developing that creativity, which also has to do with using information in creative ways, you need that brain recovery and processing during the night, where the first half of the night, a lot of what your brain is doing is sorting through everything it took in, figuring out what's important. And then the sleep stages that are aggregated more toward the later part of the night is taking what you deemed was important and organizing it, sorting it through, and integrating it. That's why you need both parts of sleep.
Yeah, that's perfect. That was going to be my next question for you, was like the learning, right? Athletes are
Yeah.
always needing to learn, focus, lock
Yes.
in on their sport. So yeah, that was perfect. That was going to be my next question. Back to recovery for just a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
I was thinking while you were talking, the amount of money that athletic departments spend on recovery tools, right?
Yeah.
When you walk into any athletic training program across the NCAA and you see all of the gadgets that we use to help student athletes recover. And it's not to say that they're not worth it, right? Some
No,
of
no.
them definitely
Yeah.
are. But sleep is so wildly underutilized
Underutilized.
recovery tool, and it's free.
Yes. And
So
it's
if people
like
can take
when you're
away one thing from this.
right. I mean, if you're working out, like the whole point of training is that you're engaging, you're pushing your body to its limit to stress it so that it can recover and learn how to operate under more intense conditions, right? So you're sort of breaking it down to build back stronger. The training process while you're in the weight room, that's when you're doing the breaking it down. When do you think the build back stronger happens? It's often during sleep. That's what you need. There was a professional team I worked with once, and their motto was sleep is our number one recovery protocol.
Yeah,
That is our number one recovery. Sleep is our
great,
number one recovery. That was their mantra.
great.
And it was like, you got it. That's
Got it.
it.
Yeah.
And like the other recovery protocols are important too, but this is one that's extremely efficient and works really well in concert with all the other ones.
Yeah, that's great. So where do naps fit in with our
Yeah.
conversations around sleep, and how do we counsel athletes on when to nap and how long to nap, and all of the complexities that come with that?
So naps are really useful. Naps, think of a nap like a snack for food. I use sleep and food analogies all the time because it works similar in the body. It's a foundational thing. So naps are like snacks. Are snacks good or bad? Well, it depends. Like,
I love them.
right. So
I love
snacks,
snacks.
like a snack in the middle of the day can be a great way to stave off hunger, improve focus, and get some good nutrients in. And same thing with a nap. A nap on purpose in the middle of the day that's not too long can be a great way to reduce fatigue, improve cognitive function, improve learning, without necessarily interfering with your sleep at night. If you're snacking too much, it'll interfere with your ability to actually eat meals. If you're snacking too late, and too close to mealtime, it can interfere with your ability to eat your meals. If you're snacking a lot, why is your appetite like? What's wrong with your appetite? Why are you not eating enough at your regular meals? What are you lacking? But some well-timed snacks during the day can be a great way to recover, can be a great way to prepare. And I definitely think the data back me up on this in terms of especially with younger people and athletes. I mean, they're great nappers. The trick is you don't want to nap too long or too late. You
Yeah.
want to you want if you're the closer you get to your natural bedtime, the more that nap is going to need, your body is going to get confused. Is this a nap or is this a sleep? So like if you're snacking too close to dinner, your body's like, well, was this a meal or not? And
Mhm.
so it creates this confusion. And so what ends up happening is if you're napping too late, if you're waking up, say in the dark, then you end up being more disoriented and you might have a harder time pushing back from that. You want at least an hour between your nap and performance. You want to shed any of that sleep inertia that's left. If you nap for too long, so what happens when you enter sleep, you start in sort of this light stage one, go into stage two, which is sort of regular vanilla sleep, and then you get into stage three, which is the sort of deep recovery sleep. You don't want that in a nap. usually, because that's really hard to wake. It's deep because it's really hard to pull out of. And if you've ever woken up from that deep sleep, you know it because you're disoriented, you're cranky, like and your day is kind of ruined. You don't want that. You want to wake up before you drop down into that. So that's why I would say 20, 30 minutes is usually enough for people. You might be able to get up to 45 and 60 if you're in the middle of the day. The later in the day, the more likely you're going to be dropping into it sooner. So you might want to keep your nap shorter. If, for example, maybe you had a really late competition and you barely got enough sleep at all that night, and you want a sleep replacement nap during the day where you want to like really make up for lost time, you can go through a full cycle. Instead of taking about 90 minutes, it'll take probably more like 2.5 hours. It'll take longer, but you can make it all the way down into the deep and then come out the other end and wake up there. That's when you want to wake up. That does count. You can get all the recovery stuff out of that. It's just a little tougher to time, but college students do this all. This is when they take their 2 to 4 hour naps in the middle of the day. That's a sleep replacement nap. It's like a shift worker kind of a nap. It works, it counts, it's legit. It's not quite as efficient as nighttime sleep, but you can do that as long as you give yourself enough time.
That's great. Great takeaways there. Really, really helpful. So I want to make sure we touch on mental health
Yeah.
and, what the current evidence is telling us about the relationship between sleep and mental health in student athletes.
Yeah, so the relationship between sleep and mental health is like this. And this is one of the most reliable correlations in all of health research is sleep and mental health, especially sleep quality, more even than sleep duration, sleep quality. Insomnia predicts new or recurring onset of depression and anxiety disorders more than depression and anxiety disorders contribute to poor sleep. It's actually more reliable the other way. Um, it's also important to note that insomnia and other sleep disturbances, but especially insomnia and nightmares too, triple suicide risk. Not just suicide ideation, but also suicide attempts and actual death by suicide is 3 times more likely in people who have sleep problems. Um, Partially due to the mental health stuff, but also partially because when you're awake a lot in the middle of the night and not sleeping, your brain isn't thinking clearly or anything, and you might be blowing things out of proportion. Um, and it's a vulnerable time. And so it's important to know this, and it's important to talk about it, especially since, suicide is the second leading cause of death in the US in adolescents and young adults. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. And I bet every student athlete who's listening to this right now knows somebody, whether they know it or not, knows somebody who's struggled with either significant mental health issues or even suicide ideation over the past 6 months to a year. This is not an uncommon phenomenon. We just don't talk about it. And sleep is related. And actually, there's good data that shows that if you want to improve mental health, start with sleep. That's actually a great foot in the door because you can make changes. And I've been and others have been specifically studying mental health in student athletes because this is something I care a lot about because you have people who are working really hard to perform as well as possible under really high stress conditions. And the the interesting thing about student athletes is they also have a lot of resilience. So if you actually look between student athletes and non-student athletes, on average, student athletes might sleep a little bit better and have better mental health because they tend to be healthier. They tend to be more active during the day, which is great for both sleep and mental health, is getting physically active. They tend to, take a little more care about what they're eating. Like all these things are connected, and they have great social supports. They have teams and teammates and all these things, which are all good. But even with all this, there's still lots of issues that um and so what we've found is the worse you sleep, the worse your mental health is for student athletes.
Yeah.
There's sort of like every additional night that you say you're not getting enough sleep, your likelihood of reporting significant mental health issues goes up by like another 20%. Um, it's pretty significant. And so if you're feeling really stressed, I would look to see, is there anything we can do in your sleep to help you sleep a little bit better, to help that emotional, cognitive machinery in your brain just be optimally functional so it can be in a best position to handle all of the stresses that you're facing.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear you talk about it in this way. It's the reason why in the updated mental health best practices, sleep is such a foundational
Yeah.
component, right, of underlying student athlete mental health. And I think it's important for schools that are tuning in to this to understand what a huge role just educating and
Yeah.
supporting your athletes through sleep can
Yes.
do for their mental health. And I think that's a great transition into our next segment. I want to talk a little bit about sleep hygiene.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about the importance of sleep and all the wonderful things that happen to your body when you do sleep and all the things that can go wrong if you don't. But we know that student athletes are faced with very demanding schedules, both academically, travel, competition, practice. And so when we think about, are there any like foundational sleep hygiene strategies that you
Yeah.
could recommend
Yeah, of
that
course.
schools can help, student athletes kind of really lock into that?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to mention before jumping into that, the first thing I want to mention is the difference between sort of sleep hygiene and sleep disorders. There's a lot of sleep disorders that are undiagnosed and untreated in student athletes. And sleep hygiene tips can be very helpful, but if you have an untreated sleep disorder, you're going to be very frustrated because it's not going to work. It's like if you need braces, there's no amount of brushing your teeth you can do that's going to fix that problem, right? And that's the difference between hygiene and treatment. So I always recommend that every athletics program and athletes should be maybe taking proactive responsibility for this too if their program isn't, is if you're having trouble sleeping, see if you have an untreated sleep disorder.
Yeah.
Like that could, sometimes insomnia is just, an occasional problem, but sometimes insomnia is like an insomnia disorder. Kind of like depression is. Like everyone can get depressed sometimes. You don't may or may not need treatment for it. But if you have a clinical depression, you need to see a mental health professional and get that treated. Same thing with insomnia. If you have mild insomnia, okay, we can deal with that and we could fix it with sleep hygiene. But if you have a clinical insomnia where it's really interfering with your ability to function, let's get you treated by a professional. And by the way, the most recommended treatment for insomnia, not just for athletes, but for athletes too, is actually a non-medication approach called cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, which is really a training protocol to reprogram your brain to sleep. We can talk about that a little more. I just want to make sure I said that so that if you go with an insomnia problem and talk to your team doc or whatever, and they start throwing sleeping pills at you, you actually might know that actually there's another approach that might be not as performance impairing that actually might outperform the sleeping pills. But there's that. And also sleep apnea.
Yeah,
Highly
that's
under,
what I was going to bring
yeah,
up. I was
yeah,
wondering what your thoughts are on the prevalence of that and how often you're seeing that in young
yeah.
athletes.
It's much more common than people think. I'm seeing it. What I'm seeing in the athletes is more what the doctors tend not to pick up, which is more the mild to moderate sleep apnea, where honestly, it probably would have gone undetected for 30 years until you were 55 or 60, and then you'd say, "Yeah, I haven't slept great my whole life," and then you get tested, and it turns out you had severe sleep apnea. When you're younger and in better shape and you have more muscle tone here, it might be more mild to moderate. Even the football players where it's higher likelihood in football and other sports where you have these sort of more muscular necks and bigger necks because it can crowd out the airway a little bit. But even in people who are fit, they just might have a narrow airway or a soft palate that is in this spot or big tonsils or something. And actually, a lot of the treatments for that, you can use like an oral device where like a retainer that you wear at night where you might not need like a CPAP machine or something, especially if it's more mild to moderate. Get it treated early. Often when athletes show up with it, the signs when I'm like, I need to get you a sleep study to see if you have sleep apnea. It's when they come in and say, I feel like my sleep is just really shallow and I don't know why. Or like, I'm tired and I'm sleepy, but then I fall asleep and like I feel like I just can't stay asleep and like I'm up and down a lot during the night. Or something, or even my stress wakes me up during the night. Like, what do you mean your stress wakes you up? Where like I wake up in the middle of the night for no reason and I don't know why, but then I feel stressed. So maybe I was like dreaming of something stressful. It's like actually you just had a respiratory event where your body woke you up because it was trying to open up your airway. And you woke up sort of with a gasp and you don't even know why. And you think it was your stress because now your heart's racing and your mind is racing because you just got shot with a little adrenaline to wake you up. But it wasn't your stress that came after you woke up. So so these sorts of signs are the sort of things I'm like, maybe it's not sleep apnea, but it's worth checking because if it is, and we didn't even look, I'd feel kind of dumb knowing that it was a possibility. So that's sort of, and so it is more common than people think. A lot of team docs and stuff aren't looking for it because the stereotypical presentation is like a male over 60 who's obese. Yes, 80% of those probably have sleep apnea, but there's it's still more common than you think in younger people who are fitter. It's just they know their times are off. They know something's up. Might as well get tested. It doesn't hurt. So first of all, get tested for a sleep disorder. Okay, if you don't have a sleep disorder, that's when you focus on sleep hygiene, where it can be preventative and can fix minor problems. So here's what you need to know about sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is about setting yourself up for success. But sometimes the rules are hard for athletes to follow. So one of the ones you see all the time is keep a regular schedule. I have yet to meet a student athlete who is physically able to keep a regular schedule.
Sure, practice at 6 a.m. one day, 6
Right.
p.m. the next day. Right.
So does that mean I have to wake up at 4:30 in the morning every day because I have to do that 2 days a week? No, please don't do that. But what you can do is build as much predictability and regularity in there as you can. Like have a routine that's regular for you, even if it's at different times, for example. So build some regularity in. Keeping your bedroom cool, dark, quiet, and comfortable. Not all student athletes have total control over this. So this is where things like eye masks and earplugs are your friend. White noise machines can be your friend. In bubble wrap your sleep if you can. Like protect yourself from the outside world if you can. Things like caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol and cannabis all around sleep can be problematic.
Can you repeat that one more time? Because that's really, really important what you just said.
Yeah, caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, and cannabis all around sleep can be problematic for different reasons. Caffeine can impact the textbook rule of thumb is 4 to 6 hours before bed. It can still be impairing your sleep. For some people, it's 12 hours. You just metabolize it a little bit differently. Some people say I can drink coffee and fall right asleep because you're exhausted, but the caffeine was still in your system and it made your sleep shallow. So there's that too. So the caffeine actually, when in doubt, you might need to cut off the caffeine a little earlier. Nicotine, you shouldn't be smoking anyway. And actually, I'm very proud. Pretty much any athlete I talk to is not smoking. It's not like it was decades ago.
Mm.
Nicotine is a stimulant, though. And people smoke to relax, especially at night or when they wake up in the middle of the night, and it causes worse sleep. And it makes breathing issues way worse. So you shouldn't be smoking anyway, because like if you where the data show that if you smoke, whatever unhealthy things you do in your life, the smoking is statistically what's going to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
That's how bad it is. So there's that. Alcohol. Alcohol is probably the most used sleep drug in the world as a sleep aid, but it's not a very good one. It can help you fall asleep faster. You wouldn't believe me if I said otherwise. That's true. But what happens is the alcohol gets out of your system. What is it? About a drink an hour, right? It exits your system. As it exits your system, it becomes stimulating because the alcohol molecule gets metabolized into acetaldehyde, which can become a neural stimulant. That then metabolizes into other compounds, which can be stimulating. And the liver, as it's processing the alcohol, as it clears out your system, it could be depleted of glutamine, which can create a glutamine rebound. So there's all kinds of stuff that can happen, which is why I don't know if college students have ever known anybody who's had a lot of alcohol. That doesn't ever happen on college campuses, I'm sure. But trust me when I say if you run into someone who drinks a lot before going to sleep, you may notice they pass out and fall asleep. But A, that sleep is shallower to begin with, but B, they tend to wake up and have a hard time getting back to sleep. They wake up extra early and then they're groggier because they can't fully recover because that's waking them up. So alcohol is a bad one. Cannabis is complicated because cannabis is CBD and THC. CBD actually doesn't do much for sleep, can make sleep worse, but it tends to be super murky. It might help relax you, but the THC sometimes can improve sleep, but the sleep effects start wearing off and people start escalating doses. It's also a potent REM sleep suppressor. And so changing and so if you stop taking it, you can or even while you're taking it, you can get vivid nightmares and stressful sleep. And if you ever dial down your dose, you can have a rebound insomnia. So it's usually, especially for athletes, it's probably not the best answer for your sleep. There's probably a better option out there for a sleep issue. But so in terms of sleep hygiene, exercise. A lot of people say don't exercise at night. Most people, it's probably fine. It's probably not interfering. If it is interfering, maybe you want to dial down on the intense activity late at night, or if you think it might be interfering, try it for a few days, see if it helps. Um, Other things, heavy meals right before going to bed can cause reflux, even if you don't know
Mhm.
that that's what it is. It can make your sleep a little more shallow, even if you don't know why. Drinking a lot of water. I know people who sleep with like a thing of water by their bedside, but like I don't know, if you want to get up and go to the bathroom more during the night, drink a whole lot of water before going to bed. If you don't wake up to go to the bathroom at all, fine, drink water for now until you get a little bit older and can't do that anymore without having to go to the bathroom. Um, so
I have one
yeah,
for you.
yeah,
A lot of times I tell athletes, don't look at your phone
yeah,
for a couple of hours before bed or look at a screen. And they'd say, well, I have to do my homework, right? So
exactly,
I've got to look
exactly.
at a screen in order to do my homework. So what about those blue light blocker glasses?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent question. So first of all, the recommendation to put your screen down an hour before bed is the best worst advice ever because it's completely true and completely useless for most athletes. So the question is how. I'm a big believer in don't tell me no, tell me how. So
Mhm.
the
Love it.
how is so first of all, the blue blocking glasses. If they're orange or red, they're almost definitely great. If they're yellow or brown, they're probably okay. But if you can put them on and you look at something that's blue and you see the color blue, they're not going to work.
Okay.
Um, they can reduce eye strain as a blue blocker, but as a light blocker for your clock, if you can see the color blue, then it's not going to be good enough. Um, what
That's
that
a
does,
great
because
easy test that people
yeah,
can use
yeah.
to see if they have good glasses. Yeah.
Yeah, we did a study where we tested 50 different lenses, and we found that there was very little difference between the 4.99 cheap plastic heart-shaped glasses. We did that on Amazon. We got the cheapest colored glasses we could find, along with the most expensive blue blockers, and they might have been a little bit better, but honestly, the orange lens blocked out the blue. Um, the other ones were better for some of the other reasons, but if all you're doing is to block blue light, just if you see the color blue, because that frequency, the blue-green frequency of light spectrum hits the retina, sends a daytime information to the clock. That's why you want that in the morning. So if you're going to go out and work out in the morning outside, which is great to get morning light, and you're going to wear sunglasses because maybe you live in Arizona, and if you didn't wear sunglasses, you'd get retinal damage in the morning. But maybe have them tinted a little more on the bluer or greener side. So you let that frequency of light in without overpowering it with the UV or whatever. So you want that in the morning, but you don't want the blue green at night for the light. But honestly, the thing that's probably keeping people up the most isn't the light. That's probably not helping, but what's probably doing more is the mental activation from whatever it is
Mhm.
you're engaged with. So what I would say is if it's 20 to 30 minutes before you're planning to go to bed, and an alarm went off on your phone that said, put me down now, and you couldn't do that, I say whatever that activity is, that's the wrong one to do. Like,
Mhm.
fine, you want to scroll or whatever, okay. But if you're having trouble putting it down, or you're losing sense of the passage of time because you're too distracted, or you're losing sense of your body's own um, feedback to you that you're getting sleepy, then that's the wrong activity. Do something a little more boring. Do something a little easier to detach from so that you
That's what
have the
it
mental
is.
and physical space to do that. So, like, again, the best thing to do on your screen is nothing. But the second best thing to do on your screen is something that's easy to detach from, that you're keeping the lights as dim as possible, especially in the blue-green spectrum. and you're doing something, I mean, maybe actively relaxing is better than nothing, but you want something you can easily detach from.
That's awesome. So, creating a supportive environment is one piece of it,
Yeah.
right? It's only one piece of the puzzle, but identifying the athletes who are actually struggling with sleep is a
Yeah.
whole nother part of the
Yeah.
puzzle. So
Ask. You have to ask.
so are there any validated screening tools though that schools
Yeah.
can use? Okay.
Yeah, there is an athlete sleep screening questionnaire, which is, and there's abbreviated version as part of the SMOT, which a lot of people know, which is the mental health screening tool. Um, that's pretty good for triaging people. For people, if you're looking particularly for insomnia, the insomnia severity index is super brief, 7 questions. Um, and it's really well validated. If you're looking for daytime sleepiness, the Epworth Sleepiness Scale is okay. It's a little more geared towards adults. I mean, but if you have someone who's having trouble staying awake at least 3 days a week, that's a sleepiness problem. Um, and you've identified it. Sleep apnea screening is tougher because students don't have the typical risk factors, but you can look at fatigue. The fatigue severity scale is one I use a lot in athletes. Um, there's also there's a sleep disorder symptom checklist is the name of a questionnaire. It's got 25 items, goes through like insomnia, apnea, even like I've diagnosed narcolepsy in athletes who didn't know they had it because no one knew what to look for. There's narcolepsy questions on the sleep disorder symptom checklist. There's other hypersomnia questions, other like restless legs it could be common among athletes. Could be caused by an iron deficiency, but could also be neuromuscular. Um, so that's a good screening tool. The SDSCL is a good one. There's a few other ones out there, and I think some of them have made it into the NCAA best practices. So I think the stop bang is also in there as a pretty good one. Um, and I think the insomnia severity index and Epworth, they're also in there too.
That's great. That's perfect. We want to make sure schools know that there are
They're
lots
out
of
there.
options out there, that they don't
Yeah.
have to rely on their own clinical knowledge to get to the
Right.
bottom of some of this. And then, one last formal question before we wrap up.
Yeah.
As sleep science continues to
Yeah.
evolve, right? New insights are emerging
Yeah.
that could potentially reshape how we support student athletes in their sleep.
Yeah.
So what recent research or emerging trends in sleep science do you find most exciting or promising? And where are there still gaps or opportunities for further investigation in those areas?
Yeah, lots. But two things that I think might be particularly interesting to athletes. One is the wearables. And there's tons of data coming out on a lot of these wearables and how to make them optimally helpful and useful.
Useful,
So
right?
yes.
Having
So
them is one thing, but
right,
using
right.
them in a way that changes practice is something different.
They're measurement tools. And just like a bathroom scale is not a weight loss program, a sleep measurement tool is not a sleep promotion program. It's how you use the information. So first of all, what we're learning, for example, is a lot of these devices, the thing they're best at is telling you on a minute-to-minute basis where you likely awake or asleep across the night physically. It might pick up awakenings you don't remember. Those don't matter. And in terms of relative to guidelines, the guidelines are based on how much sleep you feel you had, not how much sleep a device told you had. So if you feel like you slept 7 hours, but the device says 6.5, you're meeting the guidelines. You're fine. But that's what they're best at, is telling whether you were awake or asleep. The sleep stages data are kind of ballpark. They're about 60 to 70% accurate most of the time. So it's more ballpark correct, but it's not anything to don't worry about. And that's what actually the data are showing is don't worry about an individual night. If your watch says you're not getting a lot of deep sleep, for example, don't worry about that. If you're concerned, talk to a sleep person. We'll find out if you actually have a problem. If not, maybe the algorithm isn't as sensitive for you or something. A lot of the readiness sort of metrics that are coming out of there are largely untested. They could be a guide, but don't put too much stock in some of those metrics yet until they've been able to prove themselves as useful. They haven't proven themselves. The are you awake or are you asleep data and the heart rate data have proven themselves as pretty useful. The other stuff is still sort of in development research wise. Finger and wrist doesn't seem to matter. They're both good. Another big research finding that I think student athletes should know about is an emerging area of science called the glymphatic system. So the glymphatic system is a system in the brain that removes waste and toxins from the brain. And it's its own system because the way the brain is set up, it's protected by things. It doesn't connect to the blood. Like usually, you remove waste products through the blood and it goes to your kidneys or your, and you excrete it. But the brain is sort of bubble wrapped in a way. It's hard for stuff to get in to protect the brain, but it's also hard for stuff to get out. And the buildup of some of these things can cause cognitive and other problems. And so what was recently discovered was that the network, the mesh of brain cells during sleep, during especially the deeper stages of sleep, the mesh loosens, and a lot of those molecules can start filtering out, and they filter out and clear out that way. And so it looks like one of the important functions of sleep is allowing for this process to happen, and where you can clear stuff out and come with a cleaner brain the next day. And so, yeah, I mean, all the stuff that builds up during the day, sleep is important. And it seems like a similar thing happens in the immune system too, where everyone knows about, like, when you're exposed to something, then your immune system learns to react to that same virus or bacteria or whatever. It looks like that whole process of learning is very sleep dependent. So there's really cool emerging stuff in immune system and brain stuff and the technology that I think athletes can really use.
It's really exciting. I feel like while we do know a lot about sleep, there's still so much that
We're
we
learning
don't
every day.
know. And we certainly don't talk about it enough. I feel like we are starting to do that a little bit more. So really exciting stuff. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Grenner, for joining us
Yeah.
today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you about your expertise in this area. And thanks to our audience for attending today's session. Don't forget, your certificates of attendance are available. You'll find instructions in the chat on how to access those as always. Please don't forget to email ssi@ncaa.org with any questions or suggestions. And Michael, I'll let you have some last comments if you'd like to.
Yeah, no, it's great to see. I remember a time when it was really hard to convince athletic programs that sleep was worth paying attention to. And over the past 10 years or so, it's been so awesome to see that people have started seeing the value in this. And I want to express some gratitude. As a sleep person, it's nice when people see the thing you care about and they think it's cool too. But also, I want to tell people there's more out there than you probably know. There's a whole sleep field of us out there who may or may not have any contacts with people in the athletic space. If you're at a university and you have a sleep researcher there or something, you might want to reach out to them. They might be able to help. Someone in the sleep field, we want to be helpful. And I just want to leave with that message of that there's a positive field out there of sleep that wants to help.
Well, thanks again so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. And thanks again to the audience. And we look forward to seeing you all at our next SSI Spotlight.
Thank you very much.